Video and photo backlogs can leave you overwhelmed, exhausted, and burnt out. We've been there, and our fears of outsourcing stopped us in the past. Can you find an editor as invested in your brand as you are? Will other photographers and filmmakers we network with look down on us for not editing everything on our own? That fear of outsourcing can be detrimental to your career. That's why we love our partnership with Weditor. Their attention to details with not only our work, but also their care for their clients through all steps of the outsourcing process lets us fully step back from editing and focus on what we love, knowing our work is receiving the attention it needs. More than just editing, Weditor is passionate about demystifying the outsourcing market. Follow Weditor on Instagram at we_r_Weditor for free educational tips, tools, and resources to guide you through the insanity of today's editing market. For an even deeper dive, follow Weditor's blog at weditor.com/outsourcing.
Welcome to the We Got You podcast, a network curated for wedding photographers and filmmakers that dives deep into the strategies and tactics to transitioning a side hustle in the wedding industry into a full-time, thriving career. We're your hosts, luxury wedding filmmaker Emma K. Films and luxury destination wedding photographer Hannah Brook Photography. It wasn't too long ago that we picked up our cameras for the first time, having absolutely no idea where it would lead us. Years later, we're traveling the globe for beautiful destination weddings, built our dream lifestyles, and run multi-six-figure careers. It didn't happen overnight and it wasn't easy, but it is attainable and so worth it. And we're ready to teach you our strategies. Covering a variety of topics from both our firsthand experiences and reputable guest speakers' insights crucial for business growth, we're exploring the art of marketing within your niche, discussing effective ways to attract and retain clients, leverage social media, and build a strong online presence, and so much more. We're not shying away from talking through the challenges of the wedding industry and offering realistic solutions to navigate them successfully. We emphasize the importance of networking, establishing meaningful relationships with clients, and continuously honing one's craft to stand out in a competitive market. This is the We Got You podcast.
Hello. Good morning, We Got You podcast. We're super excited that you're here on another episode listening to the We Got You podcast. I could not be more excited for this week's episode because we get to talk with one of my dear friends, Peyton Frank, who is a luxury wedding filmmaker who's been named one of the best wedding filmmakers in the world, and honestly is a female filmmaker that has truly inspired me since I started my business. So Peyton, I couldn't be more happy that you're on the podcast today and have taken time out of your busy schedule. And how is it going? How is life?
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to chat with you. And, I saw you in person recently in California, and you're just such like a joy and delight. And I've loved seeing your career unfold, especially in like the last year. It's so cool to see and so exciting. So I'm like so happy to be here and connecting with you.
Thank you. No, that means a lot. And it feels like yesterday we were at Kindred and getting to hang out like with Anna and like just such a great crew and Andrew. But we really want to focus this episode today on really mastering the art of luxury wedding films. You are someone who is literally in the market doing it today. And we just would love to kind of dive into some of those things of, building relationships with your clients before the wedding day, or what are some of the most difficult aspects of working in the luxury market, and just get into some of the realness. I think the luxury market can be, and it's interesting. It's a funny term right now that is being like, I feel like almost hated on a little bit when people say luxury for like terminology. But we really just want to talk about some of the things, again, that like aren't talked about. I think it can be really looked up to as like the end all do all. And truly the luxury market is just another avenue that you get to decide if you want to go into it or not. And there are realities of the luxury market that don't fit everyone and that do fit some people really well. So we want to dive into all those things. But before we do, we would love for all of those who are listening to this podcast today who don't know you, we'd just love for you to introduce yourself and kind of walk us through your journey, how you got started into filmmaking, and where you are today.
Totally. Well, I love that first off, what you're saying is like, oh, some people are kind of hating on this term luxury. What does it mean? Does it matter? Does everyone need to be in this space? I just kind of want to say, like, I don't think it matters what, client you're serving. I think a wedding day is such a special, once in a lifetime, emotional, personal unique experience that every single client deserves like the highest level of service possible. So I think anything that we might talk about today, it's relevant for everyone. Like it doesn't really matter the wedding budget or if they have a big name planner or photographer, like these are wedding days. This is like major life event and it's something someone cares about. So like, I think, whatever we talk about today, it's going to be applicable to anyone, wherever you choose to be in the market or wherever you are in your career. But, a bit about me and my background. I don't want to talk too much about it because I've done a few podcasts at this point and I like always tell the same story, which is cute, but maybe some people have already heard it. But basically I have a background in art history and philosophy. I got into wedding planning in college and got exposed to the wedding industry and just how many women and small businesses and creatives and artists can make a living off of this industry and what a joyful, happy, exciting, like beautiful market it is. It's like we're capturing people's wedding days and it's such an honor to be a part of something so intimate and so personal. And so I kind of, I honestly just kind of fell into this. It's just taken me from like dabbling into it to then discovering photo, to then discovering video, to then discovering wedding video. And it just kind of went from there. Like it never stopped. It just became full-time pretty quickly. In the beginning, I was doing all kinds of video. I was dabbling with like stuff for small businesses or websites or social media in kind of the early days of like Instagram, whatever. And I just did like a massive amount of video work when I first started doing video. And it was, self-taught in the form of like YouTube videos or Reddit forums or like whatever. But I was really just like in my room at the time, living with my parents because I knew I wanted to start a business. And I was like, well, I should keep my cost of living as low as possible. So fortunately, I had the privilege of doing that kind of like not long after college. And I was just like in my room trying to get a laptop good enough to edit video on, teaching myself how to edit on iMovie and like just doing as much work as I possibly could to learn. So I've talked, how I get into weddings, but I don't talk a ton about how like the process of learning video was truly like trial and error, like figuring stuff out and saying yes to every opportunity. And then figuring out, okay, wait, how the heck do I do that? Like, oh, I've never recorded audio before. Like, oh, I didn't know you had to license music, like all of this stuff. So it really just like snowballed and it never stopped snowballing. And, in 2020, my career kind of took a change from doing weddings, destination weddings and Texas weddings and all of that to focusing more on the higher end of the market. And I'm sure that's probably what we'll mostly talk about today. But that's kind of my background is like this wedding industry mixed with this like DIY, like teach yourself how to do video in your parents' house, in your bedroom, on your laptop.
That's honestly, though, so refreshing to hear because I feel like a lot of people kind of start that way where you're like, okay, like I need to learn this somehow. And so you almost like have to teach yourself or have to learn in some kind of capacity and do all of the work and really put yourself out there. So that's so refreshing to hear. And then also so cool to hear that in 2020 was kind of like that shift of, okay, now I know what I'm doing. And so like, where can I take this and what is kind of like going to fit me the best and what you want to do. How did you know you wanted to like make that shift when you were, moving into the higher end market, going into luxury? How did you decide on that?
Yeah. So I think my career really beautifully at this moment can be split into these two different chapters. I've been in the wedding industry for like 10 years, but I've been doing wedding video specifically for like 8 years. So the first 4 years, it was really just that like doing and learning and building and growing and kind of learning how to travel, learning how to do this, that, how to build a team, how to run a business, how to make a profit, stuff like that. And then in 2020, so much had happened in the world. Everything felt like it was falling apart with the pandemic and the events industry, and kind of this thing was happening that we didn't think could happen. And in my own personal life too, I just kind of had a lot of really sudden changes and some like financial stresses that were really unexpected, and some really like kind of difficult stuff that kind of made me feel like, oh my God, like what's happening? Am I going to make it another year? Like things just felt so chaotic, and I truly kind of felt like I had nothing to lose. Like I felt like we were really in the world, and personally I was like, oof, like rock bottom, like major stress. And then in 2020, I kind of started to have these opportunities to learn more about the high-end wedding market and to learn from people. A long-term mentor of mine, Wendy Kay of Birds of a Feather Events, she started an online community called E3. I'm sure many listeners are familiar. And they really started talking about, pricing and like what's possible. And this was a dear personal friend of mine who I knew, since I was in college when I first started like interning with a wedding planner. And so I kind of got exposed to, this idea of like, oh, you can kind of push things and you can push yourself and you can push like your production value and you can charge for that, and people have the budget. I had gone on a girls' trip right before the pandemic that introduced me to a lot of incredible people, a lot of amazing photographers and planners. Wendy Kay was one of them. People like Valerie Darling and Amanda Slater with Slater Events and Greenwood Events, and just all of these just incredible women who had been in the industry for longer than I had, and Rebecca Yale too. The list goes on. Like it was a really great room to be in. And it kind of showed me like, oh, wow, like look at these women who are like serving this higher end of the market, and how intentional they're being with their branding and their messaging. And I kind of left that and went into 2020 with that on my mind. And from meeting Amanda Slater, I had the opportunity to work with Katie Mary, who is a photographer. I'm sure we all know her name. If you don't, please look her up. She's just so talented. And I got the opportunity to work with her for the first time at Amangani in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, on a fashion editorial shoot that Amanda Slater put together. And meeting KT was a major shift in my life personally and professionally. The influence and the impact she's had on my career is just not quantifiable. She's really just someone who is incredibly intentional. She's incredibly hardworking. She's a true artist, but she's also like very hardcore business, like understands her numbers, all of that. And, I just saw something in her that really stood out to me, and the way that she works and navigates the world really spoke to me, and especially how I had felt kind of out of control with the world and kind of in this like survival mode of like, I want to put my head down and work really hard and like make money and make this a sustainable, profitable business and push myself and see what I can do. And I have nothing to lose right now. And so I did that, and I like put everything into it. And KT saw something in me, and I think she recognized, like this is a woman who's doing this, which certainly was not the first woman to do this, but it stood out to her as a bit different, and she just kind of saw like my drive and the way that I work, and that spoke to her, and she took me under her wing a bit and introduced me to a lot of people and to a lot of her clients. And my eyes were just opened to a level of the market that I did not know existed before.
Wow. I love hearing the just like impact of people throughout your entire journey. Because I think that's something that is so powerful in each of our own journeys is at the end of the day, it's like who you meet and who knows you. And like even just having like these incredibly impactful, very talented, powerful women in your corner and just like kind of, especially when you were newer to that market, just kind of showing you the ropes and taking you under their wing. And obviously like in that moment, they saw so much in you. Like that's so incredible. And just to kind of see that transition of like where you were when you were like first getting into it, is so cool. And every single one of the planners and photographers that you mentioned are truly, truly so talented. And again, I think it's also, I think, really necessary to say, like, it's not just luck. It wasn't just luck that you built an incredible relationship with KT Mary. Like you worked your butt off, like I'm sure like had to prove to her time and time again that
literally
this
had like an interview.
Yes. And I think like I love talking about that because I think a lot of people are, oh, like, how did they get in? How did they meet these people? Like, it must be luck, it must just be luck that she met KT Mary and had a, great relationship. But so much of it comes from like, nothing is luck. Nothing is coincidence. Like you had to work your ass off to get there. And like, it's so cool to see those relationships blossom and like just the impact that she's had in your life, especially getting into the luxury market years ago. I would love to transition and really talk about when it comes to shooting a luxury wedding. What would you say are like the biggest key differences that make a film luxury beyond just shooting expensive decor? And I know like for a lot of us, we're like, oh, a luxury wedding obviously means there's a lot more details and like there's a way larger floral budget, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What would you say just it goes beyond that? Like what's a difference for someone that makes their film luxury beyond just exactly what they're shooting?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think like the biggest thing to me is what I had to understand was it's the level of service. I think the term that I most often heard was client experience. And to me, I didn't really know what that meant. I kind of thought like, oh, it's how you email them. It's like how you send the link to their gallery, stuff like that. But then as I began shooting these weddings and observing these people who have been doing this for a long time, people like KT Mary or Lynn Easton, working with brands, fashion brands like Monique Lillier or stylists like Carrie Lauren, and just all of these people who were used to this different world, I saw, oh, it's not just like client experience on the back end in terms of like, how easy is your invoice to like view and download and your contract and all of that. But it's like, it's how you show up. It's the level of service and it's how you present yourself and your team and how you can read a room and understand what is appropriate and what isn't appropriate. I think when I first started realizing that, it matters what you look like. It matters what you wear and how you dress. I was kind of like, I don't know how I feel about this. Like I'm, kind of used to like whatever this one thing or this one way. Like I was like, oh, do I have to wear like a blazer and blah 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 and all this every single time? And then you just realize like, yeah, like of course, like you're going to a black tie event, and you realize like these clients and as importantly, these other vendors, these photographers and these planners, they notice everything. They have an eye for service, an eye for detail. And these people have spent a year or at least many, many months planning every single tiny detail. What really like sets a wedding apart in terms of like budget or luxury is this level of like detail and customization. They're looking at everything on the invitation to the timing of the meal and the food and how things are presented. Like there's just so much. And this is true at every level, no matter how much money someone is spending or how large their floral budget is. Like clients care. Like this is the experience of planning a wedding. You don't just like pick a spot and that's all, and you don't put any thought or personalization into it, you're looking for a really elevated special experience. And I think I just started to pay attention to that. And I also had people tell me, I had KT tell me things like, hey, you need to be particularly mindful of how loud you're speaking, or your tone of voice, or the shoes you're wearing, or et cetera, or where you're leaving your camera bag or stuff like that. These things sound like obvious now, but I think when you're just now getting into it, you might not be thinking of this stuff. You're so in your world of like, oh, I hope I get the exposure right. And I hope I remember to press record. And I hope I get a clean source of audio. And you're so in your thing that like, you have to move past that, and you have to realize your place in this really complicated high level production, with so many vendors, so many moving parts. One thing affects everything. One person can throw off the vibe or the mood for everyone, or for the client, or for, a relationship dynamic in the family that's really sensitive. So I think like the biggest difference between luxury events and other events is like, one, the complexity of the production, and just like how many vendors, like how large of a build out, et cetera, but also just like the level of detail. And so I think you have to understand and respect your place and your role in all of that, and how much power you have to affect the mood, affect the, efficiency, et cetera, of this production. But also realizing like that can be said at every level. When I first started, I had this background in planning, and I had interned for a calligrapher, and I knew stationery, and I'd interned for a florist. So it's like I automatically started the wedding industry having a respect for everyone else's role in a wedding day. Like I'm not the most important person or most important decision. Like everything is important for it all to come together in this vision.
Wow, that's incredible to hear, and just like how you break it down, because I think a lot of people think, when they think of like the luxury wedding space, they think of like, oh, it's got more detail, they've got more money, they have a bigger budget, but it really is a completely different world, not just on what you're shooting, but also in how you're shooting, and how, like you said, how you're dressed, what you're doing, like how you're acting, where you're putting things, and how long you're talking, and how loud you're talking, and whatnot. And so it's like, I think that's something that a lot of people miss out on, is it's not what you're comfortable with anymore. It's not that same wedding outfit that you're always wearing, or same type of wedding day even that you're comfortable with. It's a completely different world, and it's something where I think a lot of people kind of think, oh, well, I'm so good at what I'm doing right now. When I want to move into the luxury industry, it'll be so easy. Like I'll just be able to step right in, and like I know how to shoot details. I know that I can shoot all these things, when really you have to like take the ego out of it, and like kind of start back at the bottom of like, okay, I'm learning, and I'm new to this level of weddings, and like what is different, and how can I adjust and pivot and like be in this world, and not think that I'm coming and like taking over, I guess, these kind of wedding days.
Does your current client delivery system feel unexciting, limiting, and boring? Maybe you're still using good old Google Drive or Dropbox to deliver your clients' wedding films. If the answer to these is yes, it's time to level up your video delivery experience with VidFlow. VidFlow is a pay-per-use online platform that allows you to deliver fully branded websites for each of your clients. While being incredibly affordable, VidFlow is accessible on mobile, desktop, and smart TVs with included long-term hosting, so that your clients can truly enjoy the entire experience when receiving their wedding films. When I first found VidFlow, it was such an easy switch that truly benefited my business substantially. With so many incredible features and options for customization and personalization, VidFlow continues to wow my clients time and time again. You can find VidFlow on Instagram or visit their website at vidflow.co. Use our code WGY20 for 20% off a yearly premium membership, and level up your client experience today with VidFlow.
And I think, you know, so many of us get into this industry because we're creatives and we're artists, and we don't want to have that typical like office lifestyle. So many of us don't have the background of like, you know, wearing a suit to the office every day, or like, not that I even know people do that anymore, but like, I definitely had no experience with that. And I also had no experience like working in the service industry before. And I think, you know, we are providing a service. It is a creative service. We are being commissioned to create like works of art, but we are in the service industry, and we are showing up with the rest of the creative team and the vendors to serve a client. You know, and we all have different frames of reference of life experience for this level of service. And so you know, if you didn't grow up going and eating at Michelin star restaurants or staying in world-class hotels and properties around the world, you might not have had experience and exposure to this. And so I think once you kind of realize how big of a part that plays, you can start, you know, either putting yourself in these situations or just like going and observing, like literally anywhere, like what makes someone good at providing a service or not just the result, but also the experience, you know, like the experience of going and getting your hair done. Like, what is the space like what makes you feel calm or confident or anxious? You know, do they talk too much? Do they, you know, make you feel relaxed and like match what you need in that experience? You know, like I have a hair girl right now she's just amazing. And it's like, if I come in there with my laptop and I need to work, she respects that. And she provides the experience that I need. Or if I come in and I want to like update her on my whole life, like we do that whole thing. Like she is just so good at reading the room and providing me what I want. And I feel so good, you know, spending money for that result, but also like for someone who gets it. Because I'm sure we've all had an experience where it's like chaotic, or they like talk your ear off and you're like, whoa, like what's going on here? So it's like, it can be something as small as that, or something as large as like taking a vacation and spending a lot of money to stay at a really, really nice property, and really observing like, okay, what's the level of detail and attention, and like what makes me feel like, oh, this is a really elevated experience. And typically it's very, very, very small things, you know, and it's kind of wild.
I feel like the biggest shock for me, like getting into the luxury market, was I went from someone whose brand was known for being like super outgoing and super bubbly and just like a total hype girl, right? From like doing like organ elopements of just like, that was like my brand and my personality, to then that shift to the luxury market where it's, you have to be able to adapt, and your personality almost, it has to be flexible on the wedding day, because they're 100% are those few weddings where my clients are all for the hype, all for the party. They want the energy, they want the vibe. And then there's plenty of my clients who are like, I honestly just need to shut up the entire day, not say words, and just film. And like, and I think honestly, that's kind of the fun of it. It's fun getting to like adapt to each wedding, and not every wedding is the same. But I think a lot of people want to get into the luxury space and they bring their ego into it. And they're like, no, I'm going to do things my way. You hired me for exactly, you know, the brand that I'm giving you, right? And like they go in and they bulldoze their way through there and try to just do everything the way that they've done it. And they don't understand that literally every single detail, again, how we've touched on so many times today, of how you talk, how you act, how you dress, how loud you're talking, it matters, and it varies client to client. So you cannot go in with this mindset of, I'm going to show up the exact same in a sense of what we just talked about. You have to be able to adapt and be flexible and read the room, read the planner that you're working with, read the photographer that you're working with, and read the clients that you're working with. And I don't know, look at it in a fun way of, I don't know, just it's different vibes and it's really fun.
Yeah. It is. It's so fun. I love this job because you are always in different situations. For me, I'm in different destinations. I'm with different planners and photographers and people. And that's the beauty of what we do, is like, it's no two are alike ever. And so I get to, kind of weave my common thread of how I see things and capture things and tell a story. but ultimately it's not my story ever. It's always my client's story and the vision that this creative team has worked on and worked so hard to bring to life. So every single film and product is unique to them. It's I'm just get to be there and be privileged enough to like bring that to life. And it's going to look different every time. Like you said, I had a client once who they hired, a very like John Dolan-esque photographer who just is like very fly on the wall. And they told me like, we don't want to know that photo and video is there. Like we literally don't want to know you are there. And so I said, hi, when I got there, and I did not talk to them again until I said goodbye. And it was magic. It was the experience they wanted. Would that work for everyone? Would everyone get that result, the result that they wanted with that experience? No, but they got the result that they wanted. And the day was magic. It felt like living inside of a movie. Like it was so cool to not try to force, how I wanted to do things on someone who knew how they wanted things to be done.
Well, and it's just like, the luxury industry is so much like learning. It's not walking in, like we've talked about. You can't walk in with an ego or like, well, I know how things work. It's like you have to be ready to like learn and be humble in the fact that like you don't know everything, and like you don't know how every wedding day is supposed to be. How you might have done every single wedding day in the past isn't how that client's going to want it. Everyone is so different, and that's the beauty of having a unique wedding day. And especially with all those differences when it comes to like clients and how you're interacting with them, do you feel like you build a relationship with your clients before the wedding day? And like, if you do, if you don't, like, how do you feel like you're able to tell an impactful story like either way?
Yeah, totally. So this varies. And I'm sure, this has been a topic of conversation before of like, well, do you have access to your clients ahead of time? Do people at this level want to talk to you? And it totally varies. I have clients who they want to spend literal hours in the proposal process talking to me and talking through things because they're really involved. They're really detail oriented. It's how they run their lives and their businesses. And then I also have clients who I never speak to once until I meet them on the wedding day. And that's okay too. I think that's part of the adaptability that, Hannah, you've been talking about and we've been talking about today. But it's the adaptability. And in those situations, the planner is kind of my client. They're my point person. They're who I'm getting the information from. And they have the information on the couple. So if there are things that you need to know or want to know, or it's part of your process to know, you just go to that planner to find that out. I'm totally adaptable. I'm totally up to and open to the experience my client wants and my couple wants. Last night I spent 3 hours. I drove and I spent 3 hours in person with an upcoming client and her mother, and we just had the best time and like the best heart to hearts, and it was incredible and amazing. And I think we'll have like a very long friendship after the wedding. But not every client, wants that or is in proximity to me. These people live all over the world and have different lives and business commitments or family commitments. Not everyone wants to be your best friend, but some people do. And that's so cool. That's so special. So, I think when you don't have access to someone, and maybe the planner doesn't have all the answers or hasn't shared a lot with you, and you feel like you're, pulling teeth or whatever the saying is, there are so many ways to learn about people just by really paying attention on the wedding weekend. For me, fortunately, I'm filming primarily multi-day events. So there's at least 1 or 2 days leading up to the wedding weekend where I get to observe them as a couple. I see how they interact. I see how the family dynamics are. I've heard speeches and toasts, and you can just gain a lot of like what their values are from paying attention. Like just pay attention. And that's like literally our job is to like pay attention to things and like capture those moments and those nuances and stuff, and those little emotions. So pay attention. Like I pay attention to the song selection. Oftentimes you can get that from the timeline of like what are the songs they're picking for like walking down the aisle or their first dance. Like that gives you a sense of their taste, which is relevant to our final product. And then just really paying attention on the wedding day. Like, what did they choose to prioritize? What are they most excited about? Is it like the fashion? Is it the decor? Is it just having fun? Is it all of these things? Sometimes you might not get the chance to ask them. Always, give them the opportunity to have access to you, of course. But if they don't want it, or they're like, whatever, we trust you, like, just pay attention and like study them. Like, I love that, we pay so close attention to people, and then we spend so much time editing that by the end of it, you're like, I know you better than you know yourself. Like, you will never spend that many hours watching yourself as I just did on the wedding weekend and then through the editing process. So it's really cool. And it's such a gift. And like, it allows me to just see and soak up all of the beauty and the complexity of people and families and relationships.
Yeah, well, and I feel like too, when you're able to like step back and like watch people and see who they are around their loved ones, see what their selections are when they're creating a day that's like to celebrate their story and everything, you get to see like that authentic side of them. It's not a curated answer to a question. It's not them trying to look a specific way. Like, this is truly who they are, like to the core, around the people that they absolutely love and that they feel the most safe around. Like, that is almost like you're taking away all, like you're opening up all the curtains and you're really getting to see who they are. And I think a lot of people kind of sleep on that and thinking like, I have to like send them all these questionnaires before the wedding day and learn all these things about them. And like, yes, while that stuff is incredible to be able to like build a relationship with a couple, the best ways to really see who they are, I feel like, is to see how they are with their people and like all those decisions and those moments and just really who they are when they're not trying to curate anything. It's so beautiful to get to like be in those moments. And I know, we've talked about just like over this episode, we've talked all about like the luxury industry, the differences between the luxury industry and other industries, and just like getting into it and everything. But I'm curious to know, especially with your experience and your journey, what do you think is the most like difficult aspect as a wedding filmmaker in the luxury industry? What would you say is most difficult, I guess, like in the weddings that you're working right now?
Yeah, I mean, most difficult, I would also reframe as like most exciting, is just like the level of production and the level of like attention and pre-planning and thoughtfulness and preparedness it takes to pull off what we're doing is wild. And my favorite events are the ones where I walk away with my team at the end of the night and I'm just like, we did it. Like, we did it and we freaking nailed it. And like, we went into it with a solid plan. We adapted because things are constantly happening and like the client's going to be so happy. And, I think it's just like with what we do, we're always on. Like, we're on for 10, 12, 15, 16, however many hours on that wedding day. There were a million different moving parts. You're so into what you're doing, you're into what your team's doing, you're into what photo and the planning team needs and the client, and there's just so much going on. And I think a lot of us who do this, we do it because we love that rush and that addiction, especially if you're in the destination market of that travel and just that like deep intensity and like the fast pacedness of it all. It's addicting. Like that's what we do. Like you have to love that process and enjoy that process. I've been fortunate enough to like be exposed to like commercial sets or narrative short film sets and stuff like that. And it's so fascinating to see like the differences, similarities or differences of like, oh wow, this is like maybe a bigger like video production team, but things move slower or the pacing's different or whatever. And, the more experiences I have of that, the more I appreciate like what we do and like one, like the level of skill and talent and focus it takes. And then also just like how exciting and fun and never the same it is. I think I spent a lot of time maybe pre-2020 thinking like, oh, do I do weddings just because it's easy and it's what I know and I'm playing it safe? And should I be pursuing, this maybe in my eyes at the time, more noble, like more interesting, like commercial world or serious film world? Like, am I not a serious filmmaker or whatever? But oh my gosh, like, no, that is so far from truth. One, we have so much creative control. We have so much responsibility. We do so much with, so little, so few people. And yeah, it's just like a skill, and it's really cool and it's really meaningful, and it's meaningful to know that what we create will outlive us and it will outlive our clients, and it will last forever. Like, we're not just selling something, like we're preserving life, and we're telling a real story.
I think it's really cool to look at it that way. I think the wedding industry can be overlooked so many times of, oh, well, that it just must be so easy. But it's like in the commercial industry, you can take a shot as many times as you want to make sure that you nail it, right? In the wedding industry, you have one shot, one opportunity, one moment to perfect. And I think it's really cool what you were saying earlier, just about kind of I remember first stepping into the luxury space, and I was super intimidated with the fact of like, these timelines are moving so quickly. You have to have multiple people on your team and you have to be everywhere all at once. And there is no excuse for anything. And I remember at first just being like, oh my God, I have no idea how to do any of this. Like, it's like scary. It was terrifying. And then to get to this point of like, no, this is a really fun challenge. It is like, I find so much enjoyment truly in like building a team and delegating things on the wedding day. And just like you said, when you get to the end of a multi-day wedding and you have a team under you that just crushed it, like, there is nothing that fulfills me more than that. And it's so cool. It is just like seeing there are different sides to it. And it is like, it's like the most difficult aspect is the preparation, but it's the most fun and challenging and the most fulfilling at the end of the day.
Totally.
There's just so much prep work that you have to do, but it's all worth it. It's all so worth it. Peyton, it has been so incredible getting to have you on the podcast episode, seriously, and just really cool getting to walk through really just what the luxury industry is about and your experience. It's been so cool hearing your journey and your transparency, and even just talking about meeting your clients before the wedding day. I think a lot of people are like, oh, I'm going to lose interaction with everyone. And it's cool hearing you just say, I just drove 3 hours and got to meet with my client and her mom. Like, there are still people out there that want to build a relationship with you. It is not the exact same for everyone. Yes, you don't get to meet every one of your clients. Like, yes, there are things that you do give up in the luxury market, but even just listening to your transparency, being like, yeah, I just met with one of my clients. You've built relationships with some of your clients, and that is out there. I just think it's really cool to hear from your perspective, and we're so grateful that you were able to hop on today. Before we close the episode, we'd love to get your Instagram and your website. We're going to link it all in the show notes below, but just for any of those people who might be listening in the car that might not be able to go right now, we'd love your Instagram, your website, and if there are any educational opportunities to learn from you, or for people to connect with you, what is the best way to do that?
Yeah, so best way to follow along is on Instagram. It's just at Peyton Frank. I do have a website, but a lot of my work is NDA'd, and like, I have very private clients, so you won't see a ton on there, but feel free to visit it at peytonandfrank.com. Please DM me. I love to have one-on-ones and mentorships. I'm really an open book, and there's only so far we can go alone. And if you're interested in like setting up a time to talk, please DM me. I'm always happy, as my schedule allows, to offer an hour of my time for money, of course. But I love, having conversations, or like, don't be afraid to slide into my DMs. And like, if there's something that you took away from this, talk, or something that like sparked in your mind, like, I'd love to hear from you. I think, people are so accessible, and we all do the same thing. Like, I'd love to hear from anyone, and always love the opportunity if you want to dive deeper and like really get into like the meat of things. Happy to set that up and arrange that as well.
Thank you. Okay. And I'm like, be careful when you say that because people will message you like truly. But no, well, yeah, we can't thank you enough for being on this episode. Thank you for sharing and being just so honest and open and transparent. And yeah, thanks for listening to another episode of the We Got You podcast. And we will see you next week.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the We Got You podcast. We would absolutely love it if you could take an extra minute to leave us a review and let us know what you think. DM us a screenshot of it and we'll send you a coffee on us. If you want access to an exclusive community, rad freebies, giveaways, and wedding referrals, then join our Facebook group today. Also, if you aren't already, subscribe to our YouTube channel and make sure that you're following along on Instagram at WeGotYou_podcast to stay up to date. We'll see you next week on the We Got You podcast.